He was not at all what I imagined a police detective to be. He wasn't menacing or threatening, and he was sweating a lot. Every time I saw him, he had a bag of nuts in his hand, and he ate them one at a time. He wasn't unfriendly or intimidating, but he was difficult to get along with. Mr. Firmout, we can't let you go until tomorrow morning. We don't have anyone to do the paperwork on Sunday night. Samuel Green tried to be professional and friendly at the same time. It didn't work. I've been in a pretrial detention cell for 3 days, and now he's telling me I have to stay one more night. It was all weird. First of all, I shouldn't have been here at all. I think they couldn't wait to pin the murder on someone. Unfortunately, I wasn't good enough for them. All I could do was look at him across the table and shrug my shoulders. Damn it, I didn't really want to get out of here anyway. I was disappointed when they told me that I would not be charged. Those bastards were sending me home. I was returned to my wife and my family. Come back? Come back? No deposit, no refund. I felt like an old soda bottle. The good news is that you can order dinner tonight from the steakhouse. Now the money is coming from another fund. You can order whatever you like. I gave him a weak smile. Sam, will you be here in the morning? Of course. Why would you want to know that? Well, I was hoping you could help me a little with this release. What do you mean? Well, I'll be completely free, right? Yes, without any conditions. Is there any way you can let me go without handing me over to my family? When Sam Green laughed, beads of sweat stood out on his forehead. You mean you want to sneak out the back door? After I nodded, he shook his head. She really hurt you, didn't she? I nodded again. I'll tell you what, John. You think about what you want, and I'll figure out how to help you get it. Is this going to be okay? That evening I had a chicken dinner and was the envy of all my cellmates. After eating an apple pie, I spent the rest of the evening going over everything that had happened in my head and trying to plan my future. My head seemed to be working fine, but I had no idea what my plans would be. I worked at the Northeast Regional ACE Equipment Distribution Center. I spent my whole day loading and unloading trucks. It wasn't very difficult, but I liked it, and the pay was adequate. I provided for my family and raised 2 beautiful boys on this salary. Todd was 16, and Jeremy was a year younger. My marriage and my life were fine until I was arrested 3 days ago. The arrest was quite simple, but when I found out the circumstances surrounding the arrest, everything became more complicated. In fact, I made them more complicated on purpose. However, this was not my intention at the time. I was at the warehouse doing my usual job at the usual shift time when the police arrived. My boss pointed at me, and I was immediately handcuffed and led into a black and white room. All this was in front of my colleagues at work. By the time I got to the patrol car, everyone in the building was aware of what was happening. Of course, I had no idea what had happened. Being a law-abiding citizen, I followed orders like a little puppy and didn't ask any questions. That's when I first met Sam Green. At first, he was a little harsh, telling me all the way not to do anything stupid. By the end of the day, his behavior began to change. After the formal introductory part of the interrogation with confirmation of my identity, everything started to get interesting. Sam Green was very interested in where I was all morning. He didn't seem happy when I assured him that 15 people could confirm that I had never left the warehouse. I tried to be polite and accommodating until he dropped a bomb on me. Do you know a man named Thomas Esterly? Well, he's not my close friend, but I know him. What does he have to do with it? He was killed at 11 o'clock this morning in the parking lot of the Holiday Inn. His car exploded. Why am I being questioned about what happened to Thomas Esterly? I haven't seen this guy in over 15 years. What was your relationship with Mr. Esterly? None at all. He was an old friend of my wife's before I met her. I've met him a few times, but never for personal reasons. What was the relationship between Mr. Esterly and your wife? Detective Green, you're starting to piss me off. Laura and Tom Esterly have been a couple for several years. I met her about 6 months after they broke up. I never asked her about her relationship with him. I suggest you talk to her. We've already done that, Mr. Firmout. We talked to her 2 hours ago today. Why? Your wife was with Mr. Esterly just before he was killed. She was at the crime scene when we arrived. Suddenly, I didn't like the way the conversation was going. I had a good marriage. My life was perfect. Laura has never given me a reason to think otherwise. Of course, it could have been my fault, because I wasn't looking for anything. It was because I never suspected anything. Tick-tock, tick-tock. My brain finally started working, and I didn't like the conclusions I came to. Since I didn't answer, he started talking again. Security cameras at the Holiday Inn show Mr. Esterly and your wife entering room 311 at 9:45 a.m. and leaving at 12:30 p.m. Your wife returned to her car, and Mr. Esterly returned to his. When Mr. Esterly tried to start his Mercedes, it exploded. Your wife was far enough away not to get hurt. Can I have a cup of coffee? He seemed a little annoyed by my request. I interrupted his flow of concentration. I needed a short break to clear my head. I just found out that my wife, with whom I spent 18 years, was unfaithful. My whole life was built around her and the children we had. Everything was falling apart. No, I did not kill Thomas Esterly, but I would really like it to be so. The rest of his questions would be superfluous. Sam Green left the room for a moment and returned with cups of black coffee from the vending machine. It was crappy, but I needed time to think, so I sipped it for a while. Detective Green, may I assume that my wife confirmed all this information, or did she have some alternative explanation? No, Mr. Fremout. There was no other explanation. We showed her the evidence, and she began to cooperate with us. She met Mr. Esterly, and they actually spent more than 2 hours together in room 311. I know this is not part of your investigation, but was this the first time they met, or were they together before? Mrs. Fremout indicated that she and Mr. Esterly had been seeing each other every month for at least 3 years. She had no idea who might have wanted Mr. Esterly dead. Now do you understand why you are our main suspect? I finished my coffee with one last sip. My body seemed to shudder at his bitterness. At the moment, it suited my mood. Why did she have to admit all this? Honestly, I think she was scared to death. It turned out that they usually arrived in the same car. She had to do some shopping today, so she decided to meet him there. If they had followed their usual routine, your wife would have been dead too. I think she knew that. Well, I think I'd better tell you everything so you can finish this. What do you mean? It was me. I parked my truck in the back of the warehouse and slipped out without anyone seeing me. I put the bomb under Esterly's car and then went back to work. I was gone for less than 30 minutes, so no one even missed me. Are you ready to sign a statement confirming this? Of course. An hour later, I was placed in my own cell. Most of the other detainees had to share a cell, but the killers were given separate cells. So why would I do something so stupid? In fact, it was simple. I was a quiet guy, but I was proud. The way I treated myself was important to me. Of course, this meant that how other people treated me was also important to me. This situation changed everything in the blink of an eye. Now it became obvious to me that my wife didn't have much respect for me. I believed Detective Green when he said that Laura had been having an affair with Thomas Esterly for 3 years. Not because of any information I had, but simply because she would never have made up something like that, and neither would he. Not only did I not want to live with her anymore, I didn't even want to see her. I was sure she would have a logical explanation for everything, but I didn't want to hear it. The best way to avoid it is to go to jail. My relationship with my 2 sons has always been great. I've never done anything to embarrass them or make them feel like I wasn't a great father. I didn't feel like a great father right now. I was a cuckold. My wife, their mother, openly admitted that she had slept with another man. There is no way that this information will not get to them. I realized that I wouldn't be able to look at my sons and keep my head up after everything happened. She humiliated me in front of my boys. She took away my manhood in front of my children. How could I face them face to face without feeling like I had let them down? My best course of action was to announce to the world that when I found out what was going on, I took action to stop it. I killed the bastard who ruined my marriage. That way, my sons could at least be a little proud of how their father handled the situation. In fact, I wish I had actually done it. It was better than nothing. Anyway, right now I didn't want to meet my sons any more than I wanted to meet my wife. I couldn't get back to work. I played cards and bowling with all the guys. If they had known that my wife had been cheating on me for 3 years, I would never have gotten over it. The humiliation I will have to endure will be more than I can bear. So there was no way I could go back to Ace Hardware. The situation with my family would be exactly the same. I didn't want to run into any of them. There was no explanation for what Laura had done to me that didn't make me look weak. My only hope was to go to prison and forget them all. The plan was to avoid trial by signing a plea. If you believe the movies and television, they always offer you a request to do so in order to save costs and problems associated with litigation. All I had to do now was wait for the arraignment. I didn't care what happened to me, but I refused to stand and face a bunch of people I knew and look like a cuckold loser. One of the nicest things about my incarceration was that I could refuse visitors. I was more or less forced to talk to the public defender who was assigned to me, but I refused to see my wife or my brother Will. Apart from my lawyer, I spent most of Friday alone. They gave me a newspaper, and articles about the murder of Thomas Esterly were everywhere. I was named the alleged murderer, and Laura was loudly declared a holiday and cheater. My sons must be so proud of me. It turned out that Esterly had made a small fortune in the real estate market and had also married well. Sam Green came in after dinner. "John, I have one short question, and then I'll let you go. Where did you get the black powder you made the bomb out of?" "There was a gun show at the Lancaster Fair last summer. I bought 2 cans there, but I don't have a receipt." I knew something was wrong as soon as I answered him. He had a big smile on his face as he walked out of the cell. "I'm not sure, but I thought I saw him wink." I thought the answer was pretty good because the boys and I actually went to that gun show. Saturday started off boring. After lunch, 2 guys from the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms in Washington showed up. I didn't like them, and I refused to talk to them without my lawyer present. It was the weekend, and they couldn't find my public defender anywhere. They left after a few hours, but they didn't seem too sad. The rest of the day passed without incident, except for a very brief visit from Sam Green. He just looked in and asked me if I was okay. I nodded in the affirmative. He smiled again and left. Sam returned on Sunday afternoon, and we spent some time together. That's when everything collapsed. "John, it took us a couple of days, but in the end we put all the pieces together. I didn't like the way you tried to mislead us, but I understand why you did it." I sat quietly, waiting for him to say something else. "The ATF guys were able to find out everything about the bomb that killed Thomas Esterly. They were even able to identify the guy who probably created the bomb, and they were right. It was C4, John, not black powder. Last night, they took a professional bomber who made a bomb, named Frank Donato, in Philadelphia. Phone records indicated that he had contacted Sylvia Esterly, Tom's wife, 13 times in the past few weeks. Sylvia Esterly withdrew $25,000 from her bank account last Wednesday. She refused to say what she had done to him. Well, that pretty much ruined my plan. I sat and listened for the next hour as Sam Green described everything that had happened. Laura would have been a collateral victim. Sylvia Esterly would have been happy if Laura had been in the car with her husband. And then it was over. I was waiting for Monday so I could be released. No deposit and no refund. That damn phrase echoed in my head like an Amy Winehouse song. A prison sentence would have left me with at least a little dignity. Now I didn't have it. I was released to a cheating wife, 2 sons who I was sure had completely lost respect for me, and a job that I would have been too embarrassed to return to. I couldn't look my family or friends in the eye anymore. The saddest thing was that I had nothing to do with all this. I was a victim. No deposit and no refund. What the hell does that even mean? Sam was a man of his word. I could see Laura, Todd, and Jeremy in the lobby when I checked out. Sam took me aside, and we went out through the garage entrance. He waited for the banks to open so I could get some cash. I left what was in the checking account, but took the $22,000 that we were saving for a new house. Then my new detective buddy drove to the ACE warehouse so I could pick up my truck. Sam and I shook hands. I had my truck and some bucks. I decided that there was nothing in the house that I couldn't live without. He returned to meet my wife and children while I was driving south on the highway. My first stop was in Knoxville. After a nice dinner and a cold beer, I turned on my mobile phone. I had 13 messages from Laura that I deleted and then called Todd. "Dad, it's you? Where the hell are you?" "I'm fine. Are you alone right now? Can you talk?" "Yes. Mom is in the bedroom. She's been there all day. Jeremy is here with me." "I'm sorry, son, but after what happened, I just couldn't bring myself to come home. I hate to break up with you guys, but you're both pretty grown up, and I think you can handle it." "We're fine, Dad. Mom looks like a wreck, but she doesn't get much sympathy from anyone, including us." You guys will have to take care of everything for a couple of years. I'll send some money as soon as I can. We talked for a few more minutes. Things weren't as bad with my sons as I expected. It seems that they were on my side, even though I escaped. I slept better that night than I expected. By noon the next day, I was in Huntsville. I rented a small trailer, and the next day I got a job at a warehouse through an agency. By the end of the next week, I was offered a permanent job. I was overqualified and underpaid, but it seemed to be a stable job and the prospects for the future looked good. I was preparing to start sending money home for the boys. All that changed when Todd called. Todd and Jeremy moved out of our house and now lived with my parents. Jeremy and Laura started fighting. It all ended with Jeremy getting a few slaps in the face from his mother. He defended himself, but did not hit her back. Todd explained very carefully that it wasn't Laura's fault. Laura tried to convince the boys that what she had done was justified to some extent. Todd tried his best to control himself, but Jeremy exploded. He seemed to call his mother by all the names I wanted. Eventually, he got to the point where Laura couldn't take it anymore. In a fit of anger, Laura screamed that they should have just left with their spineless father. Todd and Jeremy moved out the next morning. 2 days later, my father arrived in Huntsville with my 2 sons. I had no problem swapping my small trailer for a larger one. Dad stayed for a couple of days and then came home. Todd had the presence of mind to pick up their school certificates before they left, so there was no problem with them starting to live next door. The biggest difficulty was getting the 2 of them to decide which car they were going to buy. I think Todd won because Jeremy didn't have a license yet. We haven't heard anything about Laura. She never contacted my parents either. Over the next year, I received 2 good promotions with salary increases. We moved from a trailer to a small rented house. Todd had a girlfriend and a part-time job. Jeremy had a driver's license and a car with jacks in the backyard. We shared household chores, but I was stuck on cooking. I was at work when I received the divorce papers. I have not received any explanations or apologies. I really didn't want that. I would love to tell you what terrible things happened to Laura, but I can't. She was gone from my life, and I wasn't going to let her back in. I'm sure she's sitting somewhere in a comfortable armchair or on a bar stool and wishes me a safe journey. Just thinking about it brings a smile to my face. I'm sorry, Laura. You lost. No deposit, no refund.